Under the glaring eye of the midday sun, the parched town of South Valley, New Mexico slumbered in a dream of days past. An antique shop stood at its heart, its murky windows throwing back oblique reflections of an era long gone. This quiet town, caught between the folds of the past and the fringes of the present, was to be the stage upon which the relentless machinations of fate would play out. At the heart of this unfolding saga was James Sullivan, a man who bore his years with a certain grace, eyes reflecting a lifetime of understanding, a mouth curved in knowing half-smiles, each crease on his face a testament to tales of pain and perseverance. His tired yet unyielding gaze turned to the antique shop that sat huddled between a fading diner and a deserted post office. Today it was not merely a shop, but a labyrinth of unanswered questions, a wellspring of dark curiosities. James pushed open the door, a bell above jangling with the sudden intrusion. Amidst the musty smell of age and a serenade of quiet, the shop appeared more like a mausoleum, a repository of frozen moments and silenced voices. The shopkeeper, an old man named Morton, blinked up from behind a counter cluttered with artifacts. "Detective Sullivan," Morton rasped, his voice as cracked and weathered as the desert ground. "I suppose you're here about the disappearances?" James nodded, his gaze straying around the room, observing the antique trinkets and oddities that seemed almost animate in the dim light. "You've heard the rumors, then?" he asked, his voice as smooth as the worn edges of the countertop. He sighed, his gnarled fingers tracing the wood grain. "There's whispers, all right, about shadows that don't belong and folks that don't return." The dialogue between the two men weaved a tapestry of uncertainty, thickening the atmosphere of unease. Their words seemed to float in the dusty air, painting unseen shapes of dread that stirred restlessly. The sun had begun to dip low in the sky as James stepped back onto the sun-bleached streets. The fleeting visit had yielded little tangible evidence, yet the prickling at the back of his neck suggested a deeper, darker truth waiting to be unearthed. As he wandered amidst the gathering dusk, he couldn't shake the feeling of unseen eyes following his steps, an uncanny sensation born of the antique shop's unsettling aura. As the lights dimmed in the antique shop, he promised himself to delve deeper into the heart of South Valley's shadows. Not for the thrill of the chase, but for the desperate hope of illuminating the twisted path of those lost. The setting sun was a haunting mirror of his growing unease, the shadows of the mystery stretching out over the quiet town of South Valley. Behind him, the antique shop stood, as silent as the grave, a monument to the mysteries it held within, as the whispering wind seemed to echo the dread of secrets yet to unfold. The morning haze hung low over South Valley, like the ghosts of the forgotten past seeking refuge in the waking world. As the sun clawed its way over the horizon, James Sullivan found himself in front of the antique shop again. This time, his determination etched as deeply into his face as the scars of his personal losses. He entered the shop, the creaking door sounding the herald of his resolve. A tapestry of objects, cluttered and indiscriminate, wrapped itself around him. In their silent language, they whispered stories that echoed the essence of a time lost in the sands of history. Nestled in the back room was an old ledger, fraying at the edges, its pages discolored by age. Each entry was a testimony of forgotten transactions, each page bearing symbols and names that danced around the borders of the familiar and the unfathomable. It was among these entries that James discovered a symbol, a serpentine figure, that stirred a shiver of recognition in his heart. "The serpent's whisper," murmured James, his voice barely a breath in the stillness of the room. "What's that, you say?" Morton's voice jolted him back into the present. The old shopkeeper appeared in the doorway, his curious gaze flitting between James and the ledger. James held the ledger out, pointing at the symbol. Their conversation wove through the eerie quiet, each word planting a seed of understanding that gestated within the cocoon of their shared bewilderment. Morton confirmed his worst fears, relating tales of an old cemetery on the outskirts of South Valley, where that symbol, a forgotten insignia, was etched into the weathered stones. As twilight fell, James found himself navigating the labyrinth of tombstones, each an enduring monument to lives lived and lost. The serpent's whisper beckoned him through the twilight gloom, until he came across the tombstone adorned with the same ominous symbol. A chill of revelation ran through him. This was no ordinary antique shop. It was the nucleus of a far-reaching web of dark secrets. The night was alive with haunting visions as he retired to his solitary lodgings. His sleep was an abyss, the dread of his discoveries shaping nightmares that gnawed at his memories and fears. The echoes of his siblings' laughter intertwined with the faces of the missing victims, drawing out a dread that was not just cosmic, but deeply personal. When dawn broke, he rose, his gaze hardened, his resolve solidifying like the desert soil under the morning sun. The nightmare was far from over. It had only just begun. The town's clandestine underbelly revealed itself in sinister whispers and chilling revelations. He knew he had to descend further into the abyss, for his journey was a serpent swallowing its tail, leading him from the antique shop to the forgotten cemetery and back again into the heart of South Valley's hidden horror. As the cerulean sky of South Valley succumbed to the black velvet of night, the stars watched with mute horror at the unfolding drama below. The familiar streets, as if by some unseen command, twisted themselves into a bewildering maze, each turn leading James deeper into the badlands surrounding the town. His heart pounded a funeral dirge in his chest, a rhythm in sync with the ominous hush of the desert wind. The clandestine gathering was nestled deep within the desolate landscape, hidden from prying eyes by a ring of monolithic stones. He observed from the shadows, his senses tingling with a morbid mix of fear and anticipation. The air hung heavy with a sense of foreboding, as if reality itself held its breath, awaiting the unspeakable. They emerged from the darkness like grotesque marionettes, their shapes distorted by the flickering firelight. The cult, their faces masked with an ecstasy that teetered on the edge of madness, began their macabre ritual. It was a feast of shadows where the guests devoured not just the flesh, but the very soul of their victims. A wave of revulsion washed over James, the sight a grotesque tableau seared into his mind. Yet the true horror lay not in their cannibalistic practices, but in the realization that their feast was merely a prelude. The cult was not merely satisfying their grotesque appetites, but preparing to invoke something, a presence that existed just beyond the veil of human comprehension. Caught between the terror of his discoveries and the pressing need to act, he found himself teetering on the edge of reason. The terrors of the past, the specter of his lost siblings, seemed to echo in the anguished cries of the victims, a harsh reminder of his reasons to fight. His loved ones' faces, etched in his heart, became his beacon in the all-consuming darkness. And then, in the midst of his mounting fear, came a revelation that pierced his heart like an icy dagger. His loved ones were the cult's next target. The terror was no longer abstract. It was personal, and it was immediate. As the morning sun began to paint the horizon in hues of desolation, he slipped away from the feast, his body shaking, his mind reeling. He was a man caught in a nightmare, a pawn in a cosmic game that held not just his loved one, but the whole of South Valley in its unfathomable grip. As he fled, the echoes of the feast followed him, the serpentine symbols seeming to writhe in the corners of his vision. It was a whisper, a promise of the coming eclipse that threatened to shroud his sanity in the town of South Valley in a perpetual shadow. As the sun wheeled its lonely path across the celestial dome, South Valley held its breath. The day, in all its deceptive normalcy, was merely the calm before the storm. Beneath its tranquil facade, the echoes of the impending doom lingered, casting long, ominous shadows. James Sullivan walked with a purpose, his journey threading the labyrinthine heart of the town. The antique shop, once a familiar refuge, now bore the menacing air of an unseen predator. His heart echoed a chorus of dread as he pushed open the creaky door, stepping into the eye of the impending storm. In the gloomy depths of the shop, Morton was waiting, a strange glint in his aged eyes. The two men faced each other across the age-worn counter, the tension between them a tangible entity. James spoke, his words floating in the musty air, carrying the weight of impending doom in an urgent plea. "Call them off, Morton," he said, his voice echoing a suppressed desperation. Morton's cryptic smile was his only response, his silence as profound as the grave. Dusk arrived with an unnatural swiftness, as though the cosmos itself was in league with the cult. The ordinarily vibrant New Mexico sunset was a morning veil of crimson and purple, a dying echo of the day's despair. The hour of the eclipse was at hand. A sense of urgency gripped James as he made his way to the gathering once more. This time, however, he was not merely a spectator to the horrors, but a protagonist plunged headlong into the maw of the abyss. His loved ones were in danger, their fate entwined with the unfathomable designs of the cult. Under the dome of the starlit sky, the ceremony commenced. The cult, silhouetted against the flames, appeared less human and more like ancient, forgotten deities reveling in their grotesque sacrament. The anticipation was an electric charge in the air, a serpentine coil ready to spring. In a final act of defiance, he rushed forward, his actions a desperate bid to disrupt the ritual. But the cult's leader, Morton, stood unflinching, his gaze holding a cosmic dread. The sight of him, the anticipation in his eyes, bore a terror beyond comprehension. It was in this moment that the true horror unfurled, its magnitude dwarfing all previous terrors. The eclipse, a celestial phenomenon in its grandeur, was a living nightmare here. As the moon obscured the sun, reality warped around them, the cosmic darkness seeping into their very souls. A beast of unimaginable horror, its form an affront to sanity, rose from the eclipsed sun. The cosmic entity, its mere presence enough to unravel the mind, set its gaze on James. In its eyes, he saw not just his own doom, but the doom of all existence. The beast moved, a cosmic puppeteer pulling on the strings of reality. With an effortless gesture, it struck him down. As life ebbed from him, he saw his loved ones one last time, their faces a mix of horror and despair. His final thoughts were not of regret, but of acceptance, a cosmic understanding that his fate, like the eclipse, was inevitable. In the quiet town of South Valley, under the watchful eye of an eclipsed sun, James Sullivan's journey ended. His was a tale etched in the sands of time, a cosmic horror woven from the threads of the human condition. Under the uncaring cosmos, the dust of South Valley settled once more, bearing its secrets and its horrors as the echoes of the eclipse faded into oblivion. We appreciate you tuning in. If you fancied the content, show your support with a like and subscribe. Hit the bell to keep up with our eerie adventures. Eldritch Tales Factory has plenty more to offer. Until next time.